So that's all set up so I can go in the wheel and I can make one. So all I have to do with these that came out of the pug mill, the clay is spiraled like this out of the pug mill, so it runs this way in terms of grain. If I put that on the wheel like that, the bottom of the piece will crack. So I orient it so the clay particles are stranded this way. It makes it, a little harder to center, but this way it won't crack. So anytime you wedge and use clay right out of a pug mill, you have to put it this way rather than that way, or you're going to have cracks. So I just put that on there and I whack it with my hand, and then I push the corners in, put a little water on my hand. And this I sort of have to center with my fingers because it's too small to put my palms around it. So I do what's commonly called as wheel wedging. So I squeeze the clay up and squeeze it down, squeeze it up, squeeze it down. You can feel the lumpiness in the clay if it has any. There's a little bit of striation as it comes out of a pug mill, but going up and down a couple of times smooths it out. So this is a very simple piece. There's nothing complicated about it, and anybody that throws on the wheel can do it. I generally throw with a sponge because I can add some water. So that's not perfectly centered, but I don't really care because I'm going to center it as I go. I'm going to open it up, and I have to sort of visually gauge. I don't want to go all the way to the wheel header, or I won't have a bottom in my mug. And this is not really the sponge I use. I use a sponge sort of like this. This is just common upholsterer's foam. I get it as scraps. And this way I can run it under the edge. I got a little more control. So I open it out and then I fine tune the thickness of the piece at the bottom. And I can make this piece different proportions. And here I run my thumb in from the side and I'm undercutting it. And so basically it's thinner wall down here than it is above, and then I'm going to pull the fat part up. So I'm simply pulling with these two fingers. So I set them undercut and then I just simply come up. While I'm doing that, I'm adding a little water on the top. So basically I'm throwing the shape that I want. I want a shape in this that's just sort of curved on the side. Diameter at the top and diameter at the bottom is the same. And I want the rim to be a little thicker than the wall. That structurally makes the piece better. And I'm actually pulling against this flat part of my finger, which gives a wide amount of support as I pull that up. And I'm pulling this, usually I pull about 3 times on a piece like this. This piece I've done more because I'm talking while I'm doing it. And usually to create some opportunity for tunnel range, I create a throwing spiral up the side. And basically the throwing spiral is there for glaze effect. It's not there to move the clay because it's not an effective way to move the clay. I'm basically throwing in a sloppy way to get those spirals. But you can see that creates contrast and that'll help with the glaze. I'll put a little water here, and then I take this tool and I run that right at the bottom, and that rounds out the edge. So this piece is flat bottom. There's a little bit of water under that edge, so I run this sponge under there. And then I take a piece of chamois here and I wrap it around my thumbnail, and I create a little bit of line with my thumbnail right at the top. And what I'm doing is creating a nice smooth outward curve on that. So I've got a line at the bottom and a line at the top, and then spirals in between, and all that will pick up tone change on the glaze. Where is it? And I got different sponges on the stick here, and so I take that sponge on a stick and I stick it in there, and I don't really pay any attention to how much water I get in there because I sop it out afterwards. It doesn't stay in there long enough to make any difference. And then I got this tool, which is just made out of a piece of wood, and I use that to make the bottom perfectly flat, take out any ridges. So that's the last piece that I do to finish it. This will shrink to be about 1.25 cups. So it's a big sized mug cup rather than a big tankard size. They'll shrink about 10%. That'll end up being about 3.25 by 3.25, 3.5 by 3.5, more or less, after it shrinks. So I can keep throwing.